Okay, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that we had some technical difficulties when recording this. So you may notice that the audio quality is a little bit off. Well, let me be honest. I forgot to record when we did the interview. So I had to use the backup audio. So the only difficulty was my fucking brain. That's the truth. But, anyways, we made it work. So I hope you enjoy.
Yes, because we lose touch. Like we're not sleeping next to someone. It's just so jarring just how everything is wiped out, from your life, basically. So it's very interesting that we're recording this at this time in space and in the year because I am literally going through my initial grief process at this exact same time 7 years ago. My late husband got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer on Halloween Day after a long time of misdiagnoses and, trying to figure out what was going on. And that whole process was extremely fast. He was diagnosed in October 31st, and then by January 8th, he passed away. It was super, super shocking to say the least. And I've been trying to, cope, heal, and rebuild my life ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so fast. Yeah, that's like a whirlwind. You don't even have time to know what's going on.
Totally.
What was the initial symptoms like? How did you guys discover that?
So we were entertainers and we were performing magic in a cruise ship.
Mhm.
Yes, during the Olympics, our cruise ship became a floating hotel in Rio. So we were in Brazil during that time. And he started to experience kind of like abdominal pain that he would associate with kind of like having like heartburn, extreme heartburn, and 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 just like low back pain, but we were performing. So it's like I said, the wear and tear of doing a very physical magic and illusion act, or, and then just having like extreme heartburn. And that was like probably, I think we were there in August, is when the Olympics were, but we were still having somewhat of a normal life. We were getting through the shows and enjoying the scenery of being in Rio. But then once the Olympics were over and we started to sail back to Miami from Rio, it's kind of like a 10-day type of transatlantic journey. Then he started to experience severe pain that we had to like take him to the medical facilities on the ship, which is super limited, like bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
And they were able to do some blood work, and the initial thing that they said is like, well, you're probably suffering from a kidney stone. Let's give you some fluids. But also, FYI, your blood work came back with something. I can't remember the terms, but it's some marker that could be related to like cardiac type of situations. And they're like, that's something that you might want to check out before, when you get back home.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're on a cruise ship. The air quality in cruise ships is terrible. So everyone always ends up with a upper respiratory type of infection, and everyone's coughing their lungs out. We were there for like 8 months, So he was also like coughing and draining, sinus draining all the time. But it's like, nothing to worry about, right? So we get back home to Las Vegas in September. And you would think that, getting off the cruise ship, getting back to our normal lifestyle, eating a much healthier, wholesome diet would help dissipate whatever heartburn he was having. The symptoms were not going away. In fact, they were increasing. And out of nowhere, he just dropped like 20 pounds, let's just say, right?
Whoa.
And it's like now September, October, and we're supposed to get back on the cruise ship in December. And I'm like, and my late husband, Michael, he was that typical guy that refuses to go to the doctor. And, and I'm like, I'm like putting my foot down. It's like, we need to go to the doctor. We're supposed to be on the cruise ship in December. And I said, I refuse to get on a cruise ship without us figuring out what you're going through, what's happening, because I don't want to have a medical emergency at sea. Like, I refuse to do that. Right. So we went to a doctor and he's like, oh yeah, he goes with the story of like, yeah, you probably have kidney stones. They give you some Flomax and whatnot and nothing to worry about. So he's taking the prescriptions and still the pain keeps going and keeps happening. And I said, okay, it's time to go to the quick care because we need to figure it out. And we came across this wonderful woman who started to ask even more questions. And she's like, I don't understand why that doctor didn't order like, some imaging. Like, we should look at your kidneys. Like, if there's a kidney stone, maybe there's some obstruction. We need to get more information and we need to look at what's going on. So she orders the first imaging scan of the abdomen and she calls, I feel like we need to do another set. And that turns into, we need to do another set. And this is a quick care doctor. And she's like, and the thing is like, yeah, he did drop some weight, but he was energetic. He was very, he looked like a normal person. He did not look like a sick, very terminally ill person. And the doctor said, I have talked to my family. She comes from a family of doctors and it doesn't make sense. Like, I see you here in my office and what the imaging and the blood work says that does not match you, but you guys need to go to the emergency room immediately. And she's like, there's a mass in your pancreas. And because of the way that the x-ray or the CT scan works is that the abdominal imaging captures like the bottom of like the low of the lungs. And she's like, there's something in your lungs too. And also your blood work, like the calcium levels are spiked. And that tells me like there could be something wrong with your bones. And we're like in shock. And like, we could not believe what she was saying. And she's like, you need to go into the emergency room because that's gonna trigger things to move faster rather than you finding an oncologist, finding someone that will take you in and all that kind of stuff. So we end up in the emergency room literally like the day after she said that. And our lives changed immediately because he not only had a mass in his pancreas, he had cancer in his lungs, in his bones, and it was spread out in his liver. It was insane to know that we were performing on a ship for that long at such physical, like strenuous pace. And he was literally deteriorating so fast. It was insane to believe. Yeah.
That's wild. What was your reaction in the office when she was like, okay, you got to go to the emergency?
It was first like, you try to put on like your brave face and say, okay, I know that you don't like to go to the doctor, but we have to listen to this one doctor. And obviously this is we cannot play with this anymore, And then we drove home and we both collapsed in tears and in total devastation. And he said to me, he's like, I cannot believe that she just mentioned my pancreas. And he said, I had a friend that died of pancreatic cancer. And all I know is that this is not good. And I had no idea, that it's like the deadliest, type of cancer that goes undiagnosed and you present symptoms when it's too late, basically. So yeah, we were shocked and in disbelief, but we went to the hospital, and they put us in contact with this oncologist, and he said, I still need to do further testing because we need to figure out what type of cancer it is. And we're like, okay. And he's like, because there are two types of cancer. He's like, there's the Steve Jobs kind of pancreatic cancer, where it's a little bit more on the it has to do with the hormones and the endocrine system. And there's a little bit more of a life expectancy to have. And then there's the Patrick Swayze pancreatic cancer, where it's not good, and it'll be a fast decline. So we were waiting for that, and it ended up that he had the Patrick Swayze pancreatic cancer. Yeah. So they gave us a 3 to 6 months prognosis. And at first he felt like he didn't want to pursue treatment because obviously they weren't going to cure anything. It's inoperable, it's incurable. And we were ready to take like whatever holistic approach to kind of like spend the last season as comfortable as possible. But at the very last minute, he changed his mind and he decided to go for treatment. And even though I did not feel like that was the best way to do it, for the first time, I had to like not say anything and just support. I'm like, if this is what you want to do, then let's support you. And unfortunately, it ended up being more like the side effects of the extreme aggressive treatment ended up like fast forward, and it all happened just so fast. It was so fast.
I had an experience like that with my wife. So she died of stage 4 breast cancer. That was her initial diagnosis. It was in her bones. And it consistently kept growing. So she was never NED. She was one time maybe in the very beginning. And there was a moment where she had failed the medicine again. And the way that it does, it's like you go on the oral chemo or the targeted medicine. As soon as you fail it, you go to the new one, right? And the next progression of it, I remember having a conversation, and she was always on all the boards and stuff and the groups. And she was like, it seems like a lot of people are getting liver cancer from this. It like progresses to liver. And at that time, it was still just bone, which isn't great, but it's also more treatable than soft tissue. Because once it's soft tissue, it's game over. And she was like, I don't know if I should do it. And I was like, you definitely shouldn't do it if you're even questioning it, and we should figure something else out. But then she was just kind of like, no, I'm just going to listen to the doctors and it'll be fine. But I had that same moment where I was like, I just wanted to be like, don't do it. Something is telling you not to do it. But I had to just say fine. And she started it, and then she ended up getting liver cancer. And then it just was like super fast. It went all over her body.
It's so fast. And so, and I'm, for those people that can't see me, I'm a Latina woman, very outspoken and opinionated. And for the first time, I had to like zip it and say like, I can't add anything to this, So I had to just support, and unfortunately that was October 31st. So I think in November, like the first week of November, it was like, I think the week of the election is when he had his first chemo session. And then by October 28th was maybe his third round, because he had to go like every 2 weeks. And we had to pause here and there because we had hospital stays because something happened, And by the third round on October 28th, so he would have to come back home with like with like a portable, I don't know, chemo dispenser, for lack of a better term. And then we would go back on the second day back to the chemo lounge so they can unhook him and, and wait for the next 2 weeks, And when we went back to that appointment, we noticed that he was very weak and short of breath, to the point that I couldn't even park the car. Like we always like park the car and walk together. He was a very like, even though like he was severely sick, knowing that his days are counted. He always had like very positive, a sense of humor, and I want to walk. I want to stay active, you know. He couldn't walk, and so I had to like park the car by the doors, settle him in a little bench, let me park my car, let me come get you. And he could barely walk without being winded. So we get to the chemo lounge, and I tell the nurse, like, we're having these symptoms, and they check his oxygen levels, and it was like not good. And we're like, and they said, like, we're gonna put you in a wheelchair and we're gonna take you to the ER, because the chemo lounge, it is in the facilities of a hospital. And we entered the hospital on December 30th. And I left the hospital 2 weeks later, a week later, as a widow. I came back home alone.
Damn.
Yeah. Because his lungs were just filling up with water. They drained his lungs, and then they will fill up again. And it was just, there was nothing else. There was nothing else to do.
What was that first year like for? So you said you're 7 years out?
It's going to be 7 years in January. Yeah, but my life as a wife changed 7 years ago because I became a caregiver out of nowhere, and I feel like my grief and my loss, my life changed as of 7 years today, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. What was those initial year or two like for you? Like, what was the perspective shift? So for me, I had 5.5 years of watching my wife slowly die. So I was able to like see how my perspective was shifting. And then obviously the event of becoming a widow completely changes you. Like I am not the same person. Like that part of me died
100%.
and I'm just completely different, which exactly. Like, I think that's a very common thing that we all experience, but I'm curious, like, what was the initial perspective shift, or what has been lasting for you since that event?
Yeah, I'll be really honest with you. Like, I did not have the same experience as you, because again, it was so fast. Like, I went from my life is perfect and everything that I dreamed of to like, now it's like, oh my God, this is an emergency. And now it's like damage control time and caregiving and taking care of someone beyond of my qualifications, you know, like I had to learn how to give him a shot. Like, I had to like do injections in his abdomen. I had to do all these things that I did not sign up for, or I had no desire to be in the medical field whatsoever, you know? So I didn't have time to reflect or to consider the future or anything. I was like in the middle of the storm. Even like, to give you an example, like that last time that we checked in at the hospital, I wasn't even like in the beginning, I wasn't even thinking that this was the last time. I'm like, okay, this is another side effect. We're going to come out of this. Michael, I was his second wife. So I am still very good friends with his first wife, and she happens to be a nurse. And I had a phone call from her during that stay. I think it was then December 31st. And she was set to come visit us. They live in California. His family is from California. And they were set to come and visit us in Las Vegas, like maybe the weekend after, a weekend later, you know? And she's like, I just want to let you know that we're packing up the car and we're coming early. Don't worry. Like, we'll get a hotel. Don't get overwhelmed. And she's like, I just want you to know that this whole thing with the lungs, and this is not good. And she is like the one first telling me, because the doctors don't say anything, you know, they don't tell you this is the beginning of the end. She had to lovingly tell me, this is not good, and we're gonna come, and because we just want to make sure that we're there, you know. And then that kind of like grounds me into the reality of like, oh, like there's no fixing this part, you know. And I'm like, and whatever happened to that 3 months, 6 months timeline? Like, this is out the door now, you know? So I had no perspective whatsoever to think about the future or anything, because it was damage control since that cancer word got thrown out at our faces, you know? But after, I went back home by myself. Luckily, I had amazing people. I was surrounded by amazing people because of the line of work that we did. We were performing internationally for, extended periods of time. We had housemates, like we had friends that would stay at our house, live at our house, take care of the property, take care of our dogs. So there was always someone there to help and support. And by the time that hospice came into the mix as part of the conversation, I called my older sister back home in Puerto Rico and I said, I need you. And 24 hours later, she was there. So
Wow.
I came home by myself and I just could not believe that this is it. Not only did I lose my husband, but I don't have a career anymore either. I don't have a show. I don't have an act. I have absolutely nothing to go back to. And it's completely like ground zero. And it was extremely overwhelming and crazy. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's so much to fucking deal with. I remember we had a situation. So Ashley's dad, Ashley lost her mom, and her dad was the one that helped me and my wife. And I remember him coming over. It was a Friday morning, and he did the same thing that the woman did for you. And he brought me downstairs and he was like, CJ, like, we need to call the doctor. And he's like, because I've seen this before. And I was under the impression that like, we're going to get through the holidays. So she passed away in September, at the end of September. And the doctors didn't tell us. They never called us. They were waiting to call us to tell us how bad it was and for all these other reasons. But it was the same thing. Like it took him to tell me. And I was like, fuck, what? Like it wasn't supposed to be over yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like when we were in the hospital because of the lungs, not draining and all that stuff, he ended up getting transferred to the ICU. Right. And just doctors come in and out and no one says anything. And I'm like, I need answers. And then the oncologist, who was a very beautiful man, shows up and we're having a conversation, Michael and me and the doctor, to the point that now he's like in I wouldn't say like a ventilator, like he's not intubated, but he has like one of those like super intense, like a mask, like just blowing air. Yeah. And I said, all right, honey, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go to the restroom. And I run into the hallway and I stop the oncologist and I'm like, I need to know. Because by this time, like his first wife is driving from California and she gave me the reality check and, and I go, I need to know, like, what is happening here? Do I need to call his parents? Like, I need to know, is it time to call his parents?
Right.
And he's like, yes, it's time to call his parents. I'm like, thank you. Like, why is no one? Yes. So it just, everything escalated so fast. Yeah.
That like, oh man, that like brings me back. So you come home a widow, ground zero. Not only did you lose a future with your person, you've literally lost a future in every possible sense. How did you start to rebuild that? Like, when did you get to a place where you're like, okay, I can start to see something? Because I remember I'm 3 years out, and so it's, still early. I mean, 7 years is still early, but like, I remember very distinctly where it was like, I can't even picture a future. I don't even know what that even is or what that means. I'm like, all I'm doing is waking up and just trying to put food in my body and my kids' bodies so that way I can survive. How did you build up to that again?
It took some time. We didn't have any kids. So I was like home in a big house by myself with my dogs. And thankfully I had dogs because I had to feed them and they got me out of bed. Yeah. And it was extremely like beyond overwhelming, where you're like, I never had experience, which what I think it was now, like total dissociation. Like you're just like, you're not in your body, and it was extreme overwhelm. And I remember that I had one of the a former showrunner that I used to work with back in the day, who knew me and who knew Michael. And he happened to be in Las Vegas, and he actually invited me out, which saying yes to going out was the hardest thing. And I actually like met up with my friend, and he's a project manager, and he goes like, I understand your loss is so great. I know that, you have to rebuild. And he's like, to a project manager, this is so exciting. Like, you should know how exciting this is. Like, you get to paint a new painting. And I'm like, what you don't understand is that I can't even pick up a brush right now. I don't even know which brush I would pick up,
Yeah.
And
I'd be like, it's going to be black.
Exactly. Or it's going to be pink. Yeah, it's there, but with a lot of therapy and supportive friends, then I started to re-enter like my body and my life. And I had a friend who hooked me up with a job. She's like, I don't want you to worry about like having to make financial decisions right now. And she, it's Las Vegas, and it's the Las Vegas Strip has high-end fine dining all over the place. And she was a bartender at a fine dining spot. And she's like, I want you to come with me because you'll make good money and you don't have to worry about selling the house or even having to find a roommate. It's like, just come work with me, and let's just get you doing one thing. And that helped me a lot. Not to say that it was easy, because sometimes I start like, I'm in a busy Las Vegas, hopping place, and I'm dissociating. I can't hear people talking to me. It was extremely overwhelming, but it helped me to engage with people one more time, and like even start, talking to people, because then you go back home and you're by yourself, and you're in your head the entire time, so even like socializing becomes like scary and overwhelming, and getting that job really helped me to get back into my own self. And I would say 2 years, the 2-year mark is when I said, okay, I'm finally ready to pursue like my next official career. And it's something that I wanted to do even before, tragedy happened in my life. So I decided to go to massage school and become a massage therapist,
that's amazing.
knowing that it helped me so much. Like, I was doing my talk therapy with my therapist and also getting body work. And I feel like once I integrated both ends, it just really helped me get back in touch with myself. And literally the day of the 2-year mark is when I packed up everything. I drove with my dog into Austin, Texas, and that's where I relocated.
Oh, no way.
That's where I relocated, and that's where I've been for the past, it'll be 5 years in December. Yeah.
That's amazing. Have you ever, so speaking of like the body work, because that was the same thing with me. Like, I disassociated from my body, and I'm like still learning to come back into it. Have you ever heard of somatic therapy?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's been like game changing for me, where like and it starts to integrate the purely like intelligence of the body.
Yes.
And then a lot of massage and touch and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yes, because we lose touch. Like, we're not sleeping next to someone. It's just so jarring, just how everything is wiped out, from your life, basically. But yeah, my healing journey took me into this line of work, and it's been great. Once I started my business career here in Austin, I ended up working at a place that is known for holistic retreats and people that are in a healing journey, that are very intentional about that. So I had the interview with the spa director, and he said, I love everything about you, but just so you know, I want you to know, like, if you were to get hired, what kind of work you would be doing here, because it's beyond the massage. And it's like, I just want you to know that, the people that choose to come here are either experiencing terminal illness or just lost a partner. He's like, we get a bunch of widows and widowers here. And I just want to make sure that you would be like okay with this line of work. And I'm like, I stopped and I'm like, I don't share this with, especially in a professional, interview, but I want you to know, like, this is exactly why I'm here. I said, I'm one of those people. Like, I'm a widow, and this is exactly the place that I need to be. And he hired me on the spot. And it was the most fulfilling way to kind of like bring everything together, massaging people with like, terminal cancer or people that just lost, family members. And it's been very, very, very rewarding for me, for sure. Yeah.
That's amazing. So in the same kind of vein of like this connection to yourself, have you, or do you have rituals or things that you do to connect back to Michael or to feel that connection again?
Yeah, it's very interesting because just knowing how far out the 7-year mark, and they say, I never subscribed by the what is it, the 5 stages of grief? And
the stages.
Yeah. They do say like there's scientific research saying that after 7 years is like when you actually step into your new life, type of situation.
Interesting.
And it's I'm at that point where enough time has gone by where it almost feel like it's been 15 years, but also maybe a year and a half. That time is a very interesting experience, as such a traumatic event. But I'm starting to forget some parts, and I try to like stay active. Like I want to journal. I want to still remember, and I still have like, I'm very lucky. While we were performing, another magician, he's been working on a project creating like a documentary and speaking to, different performers, and we filmed separately. Separately, and we never got to see anything. And as a gift, after Michael passed away, he's like, this is like rough edit. This is not even like, you cannot share this with anyone, but I want you to have this. And I can actually hear him, laugh and say things and remember him, in his like most natural self, because performing videos out there, like I can see that's a stage persona, but like his actual like organic true self, then it's really cool to have like a little, video of him in that way. But I feel like, honestly, you never disconnect from your loved one. I still dream. I still have dreams about him, and I still like connect dots here and there. I'm in a relationship with a new person as of 3 years now, and I still like, I'm with a person that gives me the space to come in with all of this, and I still talk about him, and we talk about him. And a couple of months ago, we went to see a screening of that Talking Heads concert. And we were watching this thing, and I was laughing. He's like, "What are you laughing about?" I'm like, "Now I understand a quirky thing that Michael used to do. It's from David Byrne, like, 7 years later."
That's awesome.
Like, it's like the callback joke, I'm like, now I get it. Like, he was just doing a David Byrne weird, performance art of something, and it still comes up. So I feel like you're all like, you still stay connected, but I don't know. Music and laughter, I think, always rings a memory for me, for sure. Yeah.
The hard part that I've had, I think it started probably last year or two, is the realization that I'm like, oh, I can't hear her laugh anymore. I can't hear her voice. And like, that really hurt really bad. And like you said, it's the forgetting that like just naturally happens. I've tried to figure out like rigid ritual for myself to like create space to connect back with my wife, because like I talk to her probably almost every day or every other day. Like there's always just like a conversation that's happening with her. But I was challenged by actually my somatic therapist, and she was like, why don't you create a ritual around it where you're like, okay, in this space, I'm going to connect with her. But dreams, I've only had a few in the very beginning, and they definitely didn't feel like her. It just felt like my subconscious was trying to process what was happening. But like I've asked my kids too, like actually just asking them today, I'm like, do you ever feel mommy's presence? Because I for sure had some weird events happen after she died that I can't explain.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were, but definitely weird events. So are there signs or things that you feel like you get from him or that feel significant to you?
I think like maybe in the beginning, like I did have like some experiences like that. And then I'm like, how much of that is that our brains like protecting ourselves?
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. But do I still feel like an energy that could, yeah, like, yeah. But I'm not like 100%. I mean, I feel like there's a trajectory to that, you know, like in the beginning, yes, there was some things did happen where I'm like, huh, that was weird. And then maybe my way of staying connected is like, I think I was OCD, like keeping the house, like this is how he used to do this. So I'm going to do it this and keeping the, you know, like a decoration that he liked or that kind of stuff. And then sometimes like if it's his birthday, I'll cook, I'll just make a meal that he really liked to have, some of his favorite things, that kind of stuff, you know, but like on the esoteric type of line of thinking, I feel like as time has gone by, I'm actually like just giving myself like so like much more like love and compassion. I'm like, maybe it was you trying to keep yourself as safe and protected as you needed to be at that moment, because it's terrifying, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've always been like, I'm trying to be open to signs, but my first reaction always just like, well, I can explain that. Like, there's a reason for it, or my brain's trying to make sense of something.
I feel like I don't really notice those smaller things now. It's only the ones that like literally like hit you in the face.
Right.
Like when she was in my dream, I'm like, okay, well, like, I mean, obviously, like
with Nate, yeah.
No, she was just in my dream. Like this was a while back, like 3 years ago.
It was when you decided to stay.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was around the time.
Yeah,
but yeah, like there will be like little like. I don't necessarily think like a cardinal is like, I think that a cardinal is like an angel saying hello, but I wouldn't necessarily say like, I mean, I guess that is like considered a sign, but I'm also like, that's just like the angels coming to say hello. It really depends on the day. I think sometimes it'll depend on my mood.
Right.
Like if I'm in like a particularly like, if I'm in like a bad mood, I'd be like, it's just a fucking cardinal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do believe that like that is like, and like I, you know, like I do like to believe in that. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Like I just think it's like a nice
yeah.
Maybe it is that like the thing where you're just trying to comfort yourself, but
yeah,
like there has been like, I definitely think there has been signs over the years, but I don't know that like they've been like as like recently. I don't think there's been. Did the kids say that they've had dreams or feel her?
Yeah, one of them was like, I was like, when was the last time? They're like, oh, last month. She was just chilling in my room. I was like, how did you know? They're like, I don't know. She just was. And I was like, oh, okay. Because there was an experience that I had yesterday with a dog and I was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
That's creepy. So I was like, let me ask the kids if they feel like they still feel her.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, it could have been like something where like if she would go in their room after school and like sit and talk with them, but it's just something you don't necessarily realize that they like, I don't know, liked or look forward to or remember like fondly. You know what I mean? Like it just could be a memory that they have themselves, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's interesting to watch the grief and their process.
I feel like my dad would say the same thing.
And each of them, because they're all different.
Even like still to this, exactly. But even still to this day, it's just like when you said 7 years, Melanie, I was like, yeah, I mean, when it was 7 years, I was like 7. I was 16, so it was like, I don't know. I was like in high school, and it was, you know, weird time in your life, And now I'm like, it's like 22 years. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know the difference of like life without her. Like it, you know what I mean? Like it's been like I had 9 years with her and now I've had 22 years without her. So like I've learned to, know that like I don't go shopping at Target with my mom. Like those memes do not resonate with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's just not what my life was about.
Yeah. I want to know, CJ, like experiencing this type of label, the W label, which I rejected for the longest time. But like I was 34. I don't know how old were you, but were you able to find someone to relate to, community in that sense or anything?
Well, the short answer is no-ish, because I mean, as you are very aware, like in your 30s or young widows, there's really nothing for us. And there was like a small community that kind of formed locally here in Rochester with a few of my friends who ended up being widows. But that didn't really go anywhere. And that experience like is in some ways what kind of triggered me and Ashley to start this whole thing. Cause I'm just like, one, there's no like actual resources because nobody's talking about grief. And as soon as I became a widow, it's like nobody knew how to handle me and I didn't know how to handle the conversation, because it's like everybody's just like, oh, are you okay? Because like you just need to be okay so I can be comfortable. Not that they're doing it intentionally, but it always had this like push and pull of like, I just need to know that you're back to who you were and we can go back to the way things were. And I was just like, we are not equipped to handle this, especially at a young age, because it's like I have potentially more life left than I did with my wife. And I was with her since high school. So we were high school sweethearts. So I had 18 years with her. And I'm like, if I find somebody and I end up marrying them or staying with them, I'm going to be with that person longer than I was with my wife. And that blew my fucking mind, because I was just like, she was literally like everything to me. So yeah, I did not really have any supportive communities, and I looked, I tried a few. They just weren't great. They ended up being pretty toxic, actually. How about you?
Yeah. I did not find, and when I brought it to my therapist, I'm like, I'm having a tough time, even though like I have supportive friends and whatnot. It's just like, it's hard to find someone that this young that knows what I'm going through. And she's, and I said, and the hospice people keep calling. It's like, oh, is the chaplain or whatever come to the group? And she's like, do not. And she's like, I am telling you, do not go to those places. It's not going to be good for you. You need to join a class. You need to meet people doing things. And I'm like, okay, you said it. Okay. Yeah.
That's great advice.
I still can't believe that that there was just like nothing. It really is crazy to me that there was like nothing. When I lived in Rochester at the time that my mom died, and before she died and after she died, we were in a program called CATS, which was like kids adjusting through, I don't know,
trauma or something.
I don't know. What's the S?
Hard shit.
Through shit. They were kids adjusting through shit. And so I do remember we went to that like before and after she died, and we had always kind of like went to therapy like at various points in our lives. Like my dad was always like wanted to make sure that that was, he just sought help. He just sought out help like in that way. And our family was, as I've talked about before, like our family was, our rock really. And like, I think that was important, but I do think that the CATS like really did help us as kids. Like I have to say, like looking back on it, and for whatever reason, my entire second grade or third grade class came to my mom's funeral. They literally got permission slips signed.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's like crazy. And looking back, I was like, Jesus, that was a bit much. Like, cause I just remember like I literally like put my head in my grandma's like side and walked down the aisle with her there, and then walked down the back, like just crying my eyeballs out. I remember my dad's like first line of the eulogy, and that's all I remember. And that all of these kids were there. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to make fun of me. Like, it's probably what I was thinking. And then I just remember them being very nice when I returned back to school. Like I was out for like a week or two. And that was like, I mean, as a kid, it's kind of weird, you know, the things that you remember and the things that you don't in terms of going through it. But yeah, it was so strange to me that all of the kids were there, but it was also very nice because like they did kind of understand like Ashley doesn't have a mom anymore. Like their parents must have told them that when they were like signing this field trip form to go to a funeral. I actually honestly need to get like some of them on the podcast. Like, do you remember that? Like,
that also feels a little bit like trauma inducing for those kids.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
To like be like
that is a lot for I think I was in third grade. I don't know. But like
yeah, you're something right. Yeah.
I'm like, that's like wild. It was wild to me. Like thinking about it now, looking back, I'm like, that is crazy.
That is pretty wild. Fucking hell. For, I guess, the one thing that we like to ask everybody too is for anybody who has gone through what you've gone through or are going through, I think it's been a very interesting perspective of healing, hearing the journey that you've gone through and kind of where you're at now. What advice would you have for them?
I would say that the therapy is, I think everyone should be in therapy, regardless of whatever stage you're in life, but especially if you're going through such a deep loss, and if it's even more so if it's been such a traumatic, event. And also to acknowledge that it's never going to go away. The grief is never going to go away. I like to say, like, I still experience grief flare-ups. That's what I call it. I'm having a flare-up. And that you just have to allow yourself to have the moment or the days or the week that you're feeling. And it's a very, I don't have a word to describe it other than like that, like just like that void inside your chest, and that it's okay to feel it and to not run away from it or numb it out. And that it's going to be a part of you. But also I feel like, I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but I feel like this whole grief and loss has given me a superpower. I feel like my empathy has grown so much, and the ability to show up for people and support people and sit with them instead of trying to say something to fix something, because it's not going to get fixed,
Exactly.
I think people, I don't know if you guys experience this, but like now, I'm in my 40s, and that this is when people start losing parents and stuff like that at the regular, rate, at the prescribed age in life. And people call me and saying like, I need help. My friend just lost someone and I don't know what to do. And then I tell them, there's nothing you can do. You can,
That's right.
You can just call and not say anything, because you're not going to fix anything. You don't have to say anything. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but your friend is going to need you. So yeah.
That's amazing. And I think that's the most important thing. It's like, there's nothing to say or do. Like, we just need to know, like, this fucking sucks. And I just need somebody who's like, okay, I'm going to feel this with you.
I want to ask you, like, when you were in the middle of everything, you're caregiving for your wife and then you're in it in hospice. Did people tell you, I know this is terrible, but you're still young? That would drive me insane. Like, what type of comforting words are those? Because
that's right.
We were just talking about that on the episode we released this week, in the sense of like, at least you're still young, or at least you're like, what? That doesn't make this any better. Are you fucking kidding me?
At least you're young, or at least you got to say goodbye, or, it's okay. It all happens for a reason. Or when she was diagnosed and like going through treatment and stuff, I would have people just be like, well, it's going to work out. And I'm like, no, she's going to die. Like, statistically, there's no way that she can't, we don't have a cure on earth to get rid of her cancer. Like, all that stuff was said. And then we actually played a game at the wake where every time somebody said like, I'm sorry for your loss, or one of those stupid fucking sayings, me and the kids was always like, look at each other, and like, we just made it into a game between ourselves of, because And that's, again, like why we want to do this is like, people don't understand. Like, I know you're trying to help, but just think about what you're actually saying. Like, somebody's going through the hardest fucking time of their life that they will ever go through. And you're telling them like, don't worry, your future's fine. You're going to find somebody. I don't want somebody.
It's not what I'm thinking
right?
about
In that
right
moment,
now.
it's like, I want that person. Like, okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. It's like,
I definitely
like,
have that.
I haven't even, like, he's still here and you're telling me, oh, you're still young.
Right.
You'll find someone else. What kind of, I don't get it.
He has not even died yet.
He has not expired.
Yeah, exactly.
He hasn't, like, oh my God.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know, by the time that COVID and lockdown happened, I am feeling so confident. I have a few years under my belt. I have never run away from the work. I have been honest with the grief and with myself, and the world shuts down and I then spiral and go into a whole, it was like starting over. But this time, instead of feeling sad, I am feeling rage. And I'm angry at Michael because he left me to experience this world event by myself. And now I don't know if I'm going to make it. Am I going to die? You know, and I'm going to die alone. Like it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's wild. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and it's like, I know that that's not going to be the last time that's going to happen, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like compassion, self-compassion is I think a thing, the thing that keeps me going, you know? And I'm still recovering, you know? I'm still actively, even physically, like I didn't have problems while at sleep. I didn't clench my jaw before this, but now I do. And I still do, you know, I still wake up. I'm like, oh my God, I was so tired. I have to have a night guard on now. You know, I'm still like physically experiencing PTSD, you know?
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah, and it like just shows up in ways I'm like, where the fuck did that come from?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell? It's so frustrating.
I had the same thing happen to me, which I think for me, it's like, I don't necessarily realize that it could be from the fact that I lost my mom, that some of these things happen, because it happened so long ago that I'm just like, well, like, is this like what happens in life? Like, do you just like CJ, I had this literally the same thing happened to me, and I was like meant to meet my one friend out, and she can be a pain in the ass when you're late. And she's like, why aren't you here yet? I'm like, I literally am having a fucking panic attack. Leave me alone. like that was all. That's literally all I could say, because I was like, I had never had it before, and it was just like that thing where I was like, I didn't know if he was okay, or like what the fuck was going on.
Yeah.
And
with Nate.
I don't know, it's probably a year ago now at this point, but I think those even sometimes you know, I don't know, as you enter new phases in your life, it's like you learn something new about yourself, and you're like, okay, like why is this because like this is normal, whatever is normal, considered normal these days, or is it because, you know, like you lost your mom at 9 years old?
Yeah. And I think it's honestly, it's the inability to fake or mask, you know, it's like you have to feel, and you're not, you're not denying your feelings, you know? Yeah.
You can't. The body has more intelligence than we could possibly ever know.
Yeah.
And it tells us stuff if we want to listen. Like, you're having a fucking panic attack. Something is going on here. Pay attention.
Totally. And as much as we can wrap our heads and our brain says like, enough time has passed, you know, all of this, and you have internalized the series of events and accepted your life and whatnot. Like my nervous system is still getting used to this, you know? So
there's still triggers. There's still things that can, like, and some things are like, you can do so much to like know what said triggers are, but it's, you know, you just never know.
What could be like hospital lighting. I don't want to, I'm like, I cannot deal with that. No, I don't want to
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
I don't like doctors at all.
Yeah.
Literally.
Same here.
Like,
I can't go near a hospital building or a
I can't
medical
even,
building.
I can like barely get myself to the doctor. And it's not like, cause I'm like afraid of like a diagnosis. Like that's actually what gets me there is like, I want to know if I have something wrong with me like early so that like, you know, that they can figure it out.
Mhm.
It's just like, it's the doctor. It's like the lack of like bedside manner and like literally 99% of them. I know there's a few golden eggs out there, but like broadly speaking, they're fucking terrible.
Yes.
Like, they're just terrible. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And like, if my new rule is like, if the the receptionists at doctor's offices are miserable, like if they're like, excuse my language, but if they're cunty, I don't go in. I literally will not. I was like, because if they're not happy, the rest of the staff is not fucking happy. Like,
that's a good metric.
I had to get like some like x-rays done like on my hands and shit like that. And I was like, these are the nicest receptionists I've ever met in my life. And I was like, I'll stay here. I am not afraid to be like, no, I'm not taking this appointment anymore. I don't care how long I've waited. Because that is like the first sign of like a terrible doctor. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
That's interesting metric. Yeah, I can't. I have a really hard time with medical stuff. And I used to be doctors, chiropractors, everything all the time. And I was like, let's just do every possible thing and like be preventative health. And now like I'm so panicky about everything with that stuff. More stuff to work through. But really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you, guys.
It was awesome to hear it. It was amazing to hear about kind of your journey and what you did to help you grow through it, especially around this time right now. I appreciate you coming on and being able to share and open up. And yeah, we're really grateful and appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And I think the work that you guys are doing is definitely much needed, and you're doing a great job. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.